when you go to Facebook or anywhere, it's like the same feed. And I think we all have certain things we're passionate about and certain things we care about, certain things that are important to us. But that if we were in a community around those things, we could go deeper, we could see more results, we could make more impact in our own communities.
If you are thinking about building an online community, then today's conversation is going to be just for you. I'm joined by Jane Stecyk, who is the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Mighty Networks. And Mighty Networks is an online platform that allows you to run your community and online courses and videos and content and memberships and digital subscriptions all in one place. And don't worry, we're going to be diving into exactly what that means. So welcome, Jane. Welcome to the conversation.
So happy to be here.
I'm really glad that we've made this time to connect. And if you're happy, I'd love to go right to the start of when you came to Mighty Networks. So perhaps if you're happy to share a little bit about what you were doing before and what intrigued you to make the move and start your role at Mighty Networks.
I was a content marketer at Twitter back in 2014. And that was my first entry into tech and startups and all that great stuff. And I worked on the small and medium business team. And I loved that audience because every business starts as a small business, and you just saw such amazing drive and creativity and enthusiasm. So from there, I ended up working at a few other startups. Prior to Mighty Networks, it was a grocery delivery startup, which was a fascinating place to be during the pandemic, especially. But I really miss that audience of entrepreneurs and creators today. You know, we talk a lot about the creator economy. It's just a different type of entrepreneur. And I was looking for a company that was making a really positive impact in the world and had a really strong and seasoned leadership team that I was excited to be a part of. I think everybody who's worked in tech has joined companies where there's this revolving door of leadership. And Mighty didn't have that. Mighty had a really strong leadership team that had worked together for a while and were all obsessed with solving this problem for creators, entrepreneurs around how to have this community space that isn't on Facebook, that isn't on a platform that is like one thing you need it to do, but really this new business model that people can thrive with. So I jumped at the chance to join the company, get back to creators, get back to entrepreneurs, and really put something positive and hopeful into the world, which is, I think, is what we're doing.
Yeah, I'd love to dive more into that as we chat today, this idea of that positive impact. I mean, I know that we're all feeling it more than ever, this sense of, I wonder where the world is going and how can we stay connected and how can we make a difference. So that's great, that sense of what brought you to the role at Mighty Networks. I'd love to, just before we go into this impact and how to make things better, many of the people in my audience, they're creators, they're entrepreneurs, they're also practitioners, people with this real desire to serve others. So I'd love for you to think about what might be their why for coming to Mighty Networks. Like, why would they want to come and use this platform? Just so we can give them some context, and then we can look at this sort of making the difference and making the impact.
I think the number one reason right now is communities are an incredibly resilient business model, especially when times are uncertain. It kind of all ties together, right? We're all feeling a certain way about the world right now. Things are changing really rapidly. And I think many of us are feeling unmoored, right? Like, I don't know where to turn to, especially with the isolation we've experienced over the past few years. So community is more important than ever for people. And that means for those starting communities, if you can build a community around a meaningful why, which at Mighty Networks we call a big purpose, if you can build a community around a really strong, big purpose, why you're bringing people together, what they're going to achieve together, you have a resilient business model because people need that. And we see that in our numbers, right? Oh, all this talk about recession and uncertain economic times, and hosts on Mighty are making more money than ever because people see them as an essential business because they're getting so much value out of these communities. So whether you're a practitioner, a creator who has an audience but are looking to kind of get off the social media content creation treadmill, or somebody who doesn't have an audience at all but just has a motivation to bring people together around something really specific is key, something niche, something specific, then exploring a community, whether on Mighty or elsewhere, hey, we just want more communities in the world, is a really smart move right now.
That phrase, the content creation treadmill.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about your background at Twitter. So this seems like a really nice place just to bounce between, like, what you notice, the difference between someone who, say, is online at Twitter, and that, that is it's a social media platform where there is that pressure to consistently churn out content, versus what the experience might be when you're a host in a Mighty Network community. What would the difference be?
Our whole point and the magic of communities is that it's not about the content. People may come at first for the content, but they stay because of those connections in the community that forms. So the most successful hosts on Mighty Networks, they're posting maybe 2 to 3 times a week. And when you think about building a business on social media, I think the expectation on TikTok alone is that you're posting several times a day. So you can start to see how there's a difference in the work you're doing, the time you're spending, and frankly, how much fun it is. I mean, I'm sure there's people who love creating content, and that's awesome. But I think for many of us, it feels like a necessary evil. Like, okay, I want to do this real work, but I have to create all this content to tell people about it. Whereas if you can focus on a community where the value is in the connections that people are forming, the conversations those members are having, you're more of a dinner party host. We use that analogy a lot, that metaphor a lot, where you're the host of a party. Nobody goes to a party and the host says, okay, I'm going to talk for 2 hours. That sounds horrible. It's about, have you met Jessica? I think you're going to have so much in common. Or they throw out a great question and everybody starts talking. That's the energy in a community. And for many people, it's frankly more fun than the content creation treadmill.
That's a great analogy. What sort of feedback do you give when people are saying, how do I get that going? How do I get the dinner party guests talking amongst themselves? Because obviously if we've come from platforms like Facebook and Twitter where we're used to just watching the host, how do they then find their confidence within the community to start chatting amongst themselves?
It's the biggest fear people have, right? What if I throw a party and nobody shows up? And we've spent a lot of time because of that thinking about the strategy that works with the software we've built to make this really successful. And we've also looked at all the data of all the successful communities on Mighty Network. We have this great database that we can look at and see what really does work. And so there's a couple key things. One is having a strong, big purpose and making that really clear and explicit sets you up for success from the beginning. So when I talk about a strong, big purpose, it's pretty specific. We have a formula that we teach, but really it's hey, this is a community for these type of people. It's not super broad. It should be pretty specific if you want to be successful. A community for women, it's is that for me? I guess, maybe, I don't really know. Instead it would be a community for women who are first-time entrepreneurs who are looking to quit their day jobs and build financial freedom, right? That is pretty specific, and I can tell immediately if that's for me or not. Then you go into, what are you going to do together, and what are the results going to be? So when you lay that out from the very beginning, people kind of have an understanding of what they're going to do. It's okay, I am that woman entrepreneur. I'm going to go and join this group where we're going to share marketing strategies, and we're going to have live workshopping, and we're going to have these special guests. And because of that, I'm going to be able to quit my day job and find financial freedom, right? I already have an idea of how I'm going to contribute and also what I'm going to get out of the community. So that's the foundation for everything, is having a really strong, big purpose. Then you think about creating this magical first experience for people. We cover the mechanics of it with the product, right? Like they all have a welcome checklist they can go through. And then we encourage our hosts to think about ask an icebreaker question, which again, we have built into the product. So like ask an icebreaker question, host a new member welcome event. There's these things you can do that aren't a ton of work that set the expectation at the beginning of how people contribute and get them in the mode of like, oh, this is how I'm showing up to this community. And finally, it's really the biggest source of engagement is questions, polls and questions. So we've built this polls and questions feature, and we encourage people to post several questions a week, several a month, just to try it. Because what happens is you ask a great question, somebody responds to their response, and you get this cascading waterfall of engagement that we found to be really successful in bringing people back into the community. So much so that we had our team write a library of 1,000 questions you can copy and paste into your community. We had one host be like, oh, this is awesome. Like I scheduled up questions for the next 6 months. Thank you. Like it took me 40 minutes. I'm like, awesome. That is the goal, right? We want to make it as easy as possible. But I do find that people overthink it sometimes. Like, oh, how do I get the conversation going? And it's like, how do you get the conversation going with your friend? You say, hey, how you doing? Like, what's new with you? You ask a question. That's what happens.
It's interesting, this idea of overcomplicating. And it makes me think about how even when someone's on a social media platform, they think more content, and that's what's going to get the results. I'm curious about the difference is from your perspective, Jane, of whether it should be a paid community or a free community. Because obviously when I signed up to Mighty Networks, I remember I had the intention of making it a paid community anyway. But I remember, and maybe this is incorrect, that the suggestion was to make it a paid community. But because I was already going to do that, I didn't stop to think, oh, I wonder why. So again, I have a sense of it now, but for my audience, because there are some people who are like, I want to make it free because what if nobody joins? But I'd love to hear from you, like what you're noticing the difference between a paid and an unpaid community.
It's super simple. Paid communities have much higher engagement, 50% more than free communities. And when you think about it, it makes sense. We all pay attention to what we pay for. There's certain expectations set around, I want to get value out of this thing. And frankly, for the hosts themselves, we're so used to as creators, entrepreneurs, of giving so much away for free. And I think social media has conditioned us to give a lot away for free for this uncertain reward. But if you are charging, you can think about like, what is the energy? What is the focus I can bring to this, knowing that I am charging? Like, what is the premium experience I can create because people are paying for this? And that actually makes a huge difference in, I think, the quality of the programming and the content. You're able to focus. You're not trying to do twice the work for two audiences. We often see people say, hey, I want to do a freemium community and then like upsell for like a part of it. It's all possible in a Mighty Network. You could totally do that. I'm not saying no one is ever successful with that model, but it requires a lot more work because you have to talk to the free audience who may never want to pay because they're there for free. They're getting some stuff. And then you also have to focus on the audience that's paying, who have different expectations. And so we found it the simplest way is to charge at the front door, have a paid community. Looking at our data for hosts who charge, the average is $40 a month. So this is not something to give away for a cup of coffee, right? When people get very nervous around pricing, and I totally get it, it's scary to put yourself out there. So what we encourage you to do is think about what a member would have to replace your community with to get the results that they're going to get from the community. It could be a therapist, could be a fitness trainer, could be like 45,000 books, could be a personal coach, could be all this stuff. And when you look at how much that is costing them, $40 a month may not be too much of a stretch. So that's what we encourage people to do. And we're pretty clear about when we look at our data, paid communities are more successful.
That engagement with the paid, I've really noticed that myself. I mean, I came off Facebook for really that same reason. I was like, I had nearly 1,000 members, but such little engagement. And I thought to myself, I'd much rather have one member who was there for every one of my lives than 1,000. I mean, it's more demoralizing, to be honest, when you've got more members but very low engagement.
Yeah, and I think that's a great mindset shift that we encourage people to take, right? We there's a website called creatorscalculator.com, and you can see, that if you're charging $20 a month, $30 a month, $40 a month, it shifts your mindset of like, how many members do I need to make this successful and sustainable for me? And it's not necessarily that you need to have 100,000 members, 10,000 members. You can have a really healthy business. And we have many communities that are under 100 members, under 200 members, that are thriving businesses. We have many that are much larger, of course, but you don't need to start there. So I think that's a really important shift for people who are used to seeing these big, inflated, and sometimes meaningless social media numbers.
I'm thinking about your role in letting people know about Mighty Networks and doing the marketing, and how that might also parallel the role of someone who has a community. Like, you're both sort of out there in the wider pool wanting to bring people in.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how, for people who are watching and they're like, yes, this is really persuading me. I love the idea about having that sacred space. I love the idea of making it intentional, giving it a value with a membership charge. But don't I have to go out there onto other platforms to then bring people into this platform? And how do I do that?
Social media can be a great place to start a conversation. It's not a great place to have a conversation. And what we've found is that it can be a distraction, and it's not necessary to have a thriving community. So when you think about the top revenue generating Mighty Networks, we looked at the people who are making the most money on Mighty Networks, the top 250. We were really curious about this. Like, well, do they just all have huge social media presences and are able to get a certain percentage into like a paid community, right? Is it just like a numbers game? And they don't. The average social media number, like following, was like under 10,000. It was 8,000, 8,500. So that was a false belief that like we had to break down for ourselves. Like, is it all about social media and then you just like skim off into a community? And instead, what we found is if you have a really strong big purpose and you're super, super, super clear about who you serve, which is this concept we call your ideal member, you create this viral growth because ideal members know other ideal members. You start with your network. They invite other people. You create this ambassador culture of, I'm getting so much out of this community. I have to tell Gabriella about it. I have to tell Jessica about it. And we see that happen. And you don't see that happen with many other businesses, this organic flywheel of viral growth. But the number one thing, again, it seems so oversimplified, but we found it to be true. The number one thing that differentiates communities that fail with communities that succeed is having that really, really clear big purpose. If you can't even articulate who your community is for, what you're going to do together, and what they're going to get out of it, why would anybody join, right? You have to be really clear. And I'd say the biggest mistake people make at the beginning is just being way too broad because they want to have a community for everybody. That's a lot harder to market. And even if you get people in, they're not going to know what to do or why they should come back. So we really try to set up people for success, with what we teach in our own community, Mighty Community, which we have. We try to teach them about the big purpose and setting them off on the right foot, because that makes all the difference.
I love that you've really put that emphasis on the purpose, but also the niche, because that's something that I see myself. It's funny, I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but sometimes I'm talking to someone and they think they have a niche, but they don't. I'm curious as to what you think is going on there. Do you see that too, where someone's like, oh, I've got this niche, and then they're like you said, it's a group for women, and they think that it's very specific. Is there some sort of like niche blindness that goes on?
I think so. I think it's fear. I think a lot of it is fear. Like, if I get too specific, then there's nobody in the world who is that thing. But it's just an unfounded fear. I mean, we found the most, we have communities for equine therapists. We have communities for rug tufters of the Midwest. Like, there is so much. And it doesn't mean that you have to pick some bizarre thing that no one has ever talked about. Like, we're a community for men who raise hermit crabs to tap dance. Like, you don't have to like make up some crazy thing, but it's really just going beyond that surface level of category one, right? Like, we're a community for entrepreneurs. There are so many levels of detail in there that you're missing. And most likely they are thinking of a specific type of entrepreneur, right? Like, it's like, and so we try to ask those questions and help them out. When people come to us and say, hey, it's a community for entrepreneurs, it's like, well, like, what's your background? What kind of entrepreneur? Like, what prompted you to start this? And then you hear stories like, well, I was a first-time entrepreneur in, in fintech, and I needed a mentor, and I was also like a first-time dad. You get these like really specific stories, and you're like, yeah, there's probably thousands of people exactly like that. We encourage people to think about transition points in our big purpose formula, because transitions are when people need community the most, right? A transition could be your kids are all grown up and going to college, and you're at this like crisis in your life of like, what do I do with my time? Or it could be that you are starting a new job in a new field you don't have much experience in. It could be that you are becoming a first-time parent. It could be that you are moving to a new country where you're going to be an expat. When you start to think about like what transition am I helping people with, that's a really helpful exercise to get pretty specific about who you're going to serve.
That's a lovely detail. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I love that. Like, go a few layers deep into that category. Like, you've got that first layer, but find some specific ones, but also that transition point. Lovely.
Yeah. We teach this idea of your story, right? Because as the host of the community, this is a motivation typically born from you in some way. And so in our community design programming, we help people think about their story and write out their story. And often when they think about like, why am I the best person to host this community, and they write down their story, the light bulbs start to come on. Like, oh, that's why. Like, that's where that comes from. And so that's a helpful exercise as well.
I want to go back to the impact that you were talking about at the beginning, and really get your take, Jane, on what you feel makes Mighty Networks important today.
Our CEO, Gina, said something the other day that really resonated with me, which is we aren't all meant to live in the same feed. Like, when you go to Facebook or anywhere, it's like the same feed. And I think we all have certain things we're passionate about and certain things we care about, certain things that are important to us. But that if we were in a community around those things, we could go deeper, we could see more results, we could make more impact in our own communities. And so that really is what resonates for me. It's like, we want to live in this world with millions of vibrant, unique communities where people are coming together to master things that are really important, really interesting to them. And I think before Mighty Networks, there wasn't an easy way to do that on a global scale. And so the transformation we see for members coming out of these communities is incredible. I mean, everybody wants to work at a company that's like, we're changing lives. But it's true. We've seen it. We've seen people find financial freedom through these communities they're in, go on these incredible health journeys, transform their relationships, and it's no coincidence that I think a lot of the most successful communities are around those foundational things: career, leadership, parenting, relationships, health, love, like those things that make such an incredible impact in people's lives. And I'm just proud to be a part of it. And I do think that if we were all part of communities that we felt really comfortable in, that we felt were moving us forward towards our goals, the world would be a better place.
I totally agree. I love this idea of almost like it's a personalized feed, isn't it? Gone is the jump, and I don't use Facebook anymore, and one of the reasons was I would go there and it just took a moment of scrolling and there was something in my feed that would trigger me. I didn't want to see it.
Yeah.
And so the beauty is when you have this specific community that has topics and content completely relevant to where you are, you're not going to see anything in that feed from an ex or something, something on a topic that's political when you're not political. Like, I love that. It's a feed that's totally curated for you and your journey right now in this moment.
Yeah. And I think that's why courses are such a natural fit for our creators and entrepreneurs and for Mighty itself, like for communities, because when you think about trying to learn something and really internalize it and like apply it to your life, it's not going to happen on Facebook. It's not going to happen on your own, right? So, on Facebook, you're going to be distracted by like ads for the latest, I don't know, like random stuff and like grandma's birthday pictures, right? So it's a really crappy place to learn, even though theoretically you have people around you, you have some kind of community. But then on online course platforms where they're like, great, watch these 10 videos. I don't know about you, but like, I do not hold myself accountable to that. Like the number of courses I've bought where I'm like, I'm going to watch those and do that. And then I just don't. So I think one of the reasons why community is such a powerful force for good is because it's the best way to learn. We've seen online courses blow up for Mighty and the number of people offering them because that light bulb goes off of like, oh, we have this community. We all want to learn stuff together. Let's incorporate online courses here because it's all in the same place. And it just gives people focus that they need.
I want to ask a question that's very much related to me, but I hope that people watching this will also find it interesting as well. I'm curious what you would say to someone who has a community but wants to make a pivot. So they want to keep that, rather than start up a new one, because one of the reasons I came to Mighty was I wanted to simplify. I didn't want to have all of these platforms and all of these things in different places. So I don't like the idea of starting up a separate community. I want to make the pivot within the community.
A pivot around the purpose of the community? Yeah, I think it's possible. I think you should be prepared that some of your members may be like, this isn't really for me, right? And again, it's that idea of what is the big purpose? Who is this ideal member? And it may not align with some of the people in your current membership, which I think is fine. But it's certainly doable if you think there are some people in the same space who it would align with. I would say it can be hard to run multiple communities. So you may want to ramp down this one, start the new one. I mean, you don't have to like start another separate Mighty network or platform. But you may have some people who leave, and that's okay. Like, as long as your big purpose is really clear and you feel strongly about the motivation for why you're doing this and articulate that to your members, you may find there are people who have been kind of silent in the current community are like, oh, that's actually for me, and start to become your new top active members. But it's possible. What I would do when doing that is go through the exercise of, what's my big purpose? Who is my ideal member? What's the transition? What's my story? Why am I like, think about it like you're starting a new community and go through the exercise, because I think that again, like will give you so much clarity and focus and make you more successful.
Beautiful. It's interesting actually, because I'm coming to the end of the length of the membership, and some members have left because their membership has come to an end. And in terms of this, some people will leave. I sort of see that the ones who wouldn't be relevant to the new direction have already left, and the ones remaining, I'm sort of looking at them thinking, none of them are going to, like, I can't see any of the ones in the current membership complaining in the new direction. I can see them, like you say, sort of becoming more vocal, because it's like, oh, this is even more aligned with what I want and where I'm going.
And you have a gift of having this membership already in place where you can talk to those people and make them feel a part of the decision, you know, get on the phone with them, get in a chat with them, be like, hey, I'm thinking about making some changes. I think it's funny. Sometimes people are a little nervous about talking to people in their network or their members about, you know, their ideas or their vision for what could happen, but that's such an asset. I mean, it's such a gift to be able to get feedback and workshop things with your membership. So you're well positioned to talk to those members and be like, hey, I'm thinking about this. You know, what do you think? Would you be interested in being a part of this community with this new focus? That's great.
Thanks, James. Great to get a little personal question in there as well.
Of course.
Before we conclude, I just want to give a moment, because it may be that you're like, there's something that Gabriella didn't ask, like, there's this new thing that we're planning with Mighty that I really want the opportunity to talk about at the moment. So is there anything I didn't ask, or anything that you just want to share with us that's exciting?
I would encourage anybody who is interested in community building to come and join us in Mighty Community. It's just community.mightynetworks.com. It's our own Mighty Network. It is free to join. And it's where we teach about how to build a community. So really, it's just an invitation to people who have been intrigued by this to come and learn with us, see how we model, you know, building a great community, and get a taste for all the resources and strategy help I've talked about here with, like, the question guide and how to build this wonderful first experience. Because our strategy for Mighty Networks is, you know, education first, and then if you want the software, awesome. But we're just so passionate about helping people build incredible communities. So that's been our focus for the last year plus, is putting lots of great resources and insights and helpful tips out into the world. And so I'm just eager for people to use them, experience them. So come on over to Mighty Community. We got lots of good stuff rolling out.
That was where I started, actually. Great. Yeah, I started and then got inspired. Yeah. And actually that 1,000 questions document is, I mean, that's just like one example of the amazing advice and content that you guys give out. It's, the amount of free content, and I love it because there's no ads. Like, you just get the gold without any of the sort of sales or fluff or stuff that isn't relevant.
We want to take away the false belief that, like, this is going to be hard. Like, we want to give you the templates and everything we've seen be successful, because it's not as hard as people think. We know that there are a few things you can do to set yourself up for success, whether that's having a great big purpose, asking a great question. So that's what we're doing in Mighty Community. I'm so glad that was your first experience with Mighty. I think it's the best place, the warm, welcoming, awesome environment. So I just hope to see more people in there.
We'll put the link in the description below. And
great.
I think you and I may have connected via LinkedIn. So if you're happy, I'll share, because you were quite happy to chat on LinkedIn. So I'll put your profile, I'll put Gina's profile as well, because I love just seeing her stuff too.
Yeah.
But Jane, it's been really fantastic to get this conversation in today. Thank you so much for your time.
I'm available for more community questions. LinkedIn, sure, but I'm also in Mighty Community, and you can DM me.
Of course.
So I hope to see some of the listeners today in there.